When Bobby Orr was a 12-year-old, he was one of many young fans who waited in line for the chance to meet the great Gordie Howe at a store in Parry Sound, Ontario. He recalls, "Gordie Howe asked me if I wanted to play hockey, and I told him I wanted to make it to the NHL, and he told me, 'Well, if you get there, be careful, watch my elbows.' That turned out to be good advice." On the night of October 19th, 1966, during Orr's fourth game in the NHL as an 18-year-old rookie, he went into the corner to make a pass when a grizzled 38-year-old Gordie Howe laid him out in the corner with a massive hit. Orr recalls, "I'd had my head down and he hit me pretty good. Gordie had let me know that he was still the man. He was standing over me, glaring down at me." Orr would get his revenge on Howe with a hit later in the same game to mark the beginning of a great battle between the two legends. Their battles would continue all the way until Orr retired in 1979, after one of the greatest careers in the history of the NHL, collecting 8 Norris trophies for the league's best defenseman, 3 Hart trophies for league MVP, and a staggering 2 Art Ross trophies as a defenseman. He still remains the only person to have ever accomplished that feat in the history of the game. But that's not the crazy part. Orr's career had come and gone, but the man he met at a store when he was 12 was still playing in the league. Howe didn't retire from the NHL until 1980 at the age of 51. In fact, he played another game in the IHL in 1998 at the age of 69. Here's a timeline to simplify things and put them into perspective. It's mind-boggling to consider that Gordie Howe was playing in the NHL before Bobby Orr was even born, and he continued playing until after Orr had retired. Has there ever been a nickname more fitting than Howe's Mr. Hockey? This is just one of many insane NHL facts that you have to see to believe. When I say the name Joe Sakic, what team do you think of? The Colorado Avalanche, right? But what if I told you the reason for Sakic remaining in Colorado for his entire career was because of a Harrison Ford blockbuster movie? In August of 1997, a summer removed from Joe Sakic leading his freshly relocated Colorado Avalanche to the Stanley Cup, the star forward signed an offer sheet from the New York Rangers offering him $21 million over 3 years, including a $15 million upfront signing bonus. The contract was structured specifically so it made it difficult for Colorado to match, since they were primarily owned by a company called Ascent Entertainment, which was bleeding money. This meant that the $15 million signing bonus needed to match the offer sheet was money that they simply didn't have at the time. As a result, all signs pointed to Sakic becoming a New York Ranger. However, Ascent Entertainment helped finance Air Force One, a blockbuster movie released in July 1997, just a few days before Sakic signed the offer sheet. Ascent was in line to take 10% of all profits from the movie, therefore making its success critical to ensuring that the Avalanche were able to match the Sakic offer sheet. Thankfully for them, the movie eventually made $315 million at the box office, netting Colorado's ownership enough money to keep Sakic in Denver. By matching the offer sheet for Sakic, the Avalanche kept one of their cornerstone players and remained one of the league's best teams. They reached the conference final in 4 of the next 5 seasons and won a second cup during the 2000 to 2001 season with Sakic playing a central role in all of it. If the movie had flopped, Sakic probably ends up in New York and the entire landscape of the NHL would have changed. We've all heard about Gretzky's ridiculous records, several of which will likely never be broken. But the sheer insanity of what he did from March 13th, 1983 to January 27th, 1984 needs to be talked about more. In that time span, Gretzky recorded a point in 60 straight games, posting a monumental 70 goals and 111 assists for 181 points. That's almost an entire calendar year, without going pointless in a single game. The closest anyone has come to Gretzky's streak was Lemieux, who had a streak of 46 straight games with at least a point in 1989. The next closest person not named Gretzky or Lemieux, Matt Sundin in 1992, who scored a point in 31 straight games for a total of 48 points during the streak. While that's extremely impressive, Gretzky's streak was just on another stratosphere and likely will never be surpassed. Speaking of streaks that will never be surpassed, what if I asked you to guess the most number of games a goalie has started in a row? What would your guess be? In the modern-day NHL, it's rare for a goalie to even start 10 games in a row during the regular season unless they're in a tight playoff race. But from 1955 to 1962, Glenn Hall started an astonishing 502 consecutive games. And these weren't games where he started the games but didn't finish them. He completed all 502 games in full, spanning 8 seasons. That number is so astronomical that it might actually be more unattainable than Gretzky's records. And to top it all off, the man played all of those games without a helmet, just taking rubber straight to the dome night after night. You couldn't pay me enough to do that if I'm being honest. But look at this man, not an ounce of fear in his eyes. See this box score from April 9th, 2014? Seems like a regular 3-1 win for Columbus over Dallas, doesn't it? But what if I told you that one of the players who scored a goal in this game didn't even play in the game? Doesn't sound believable, does it? To understand how this is possible, we first need to go back 32 days to March 10th, 2014, where the same two teams were scheduled to play. Nathan Horton scored the first goal of the game for his Blue Jackets, giving them a 1-0 lead. However, 4 minutes later in that same period, Rich Peverley would suffer a cardiac event and would collapse on the bench, needing to get CPR by medical training staff. Due to the serious nature of the injury, the game was postponed entirely, with a makeup game set for later in the season. But instead of restarting from the beginning, the makeup game continued from the last stopping point, with the score remaining 1-0 for the Blue Jackets. However, Horton missed the makeup game due to injury, and ultimately technically recorded a goal in a game he physically didn't play in. Crazily enough, that goal was also the last goal of Horton's career, who retired at the end of the 2014 season. Horton's goal represents the only known instance in NHL history in which a player was credited with a goal in a game he didn't play. I guess Gretzky and Michael Scott weren't completely accurate in their statement, as apparently you make 100% of the shots you don't take if you're Nathan Horton.